I watched through my kitchen window as the bulldozer tore through my grandfather's pasture, the same land where I learned to ride horses, the same ground where 3 generations of my family had worked cattle. Margaret Thornfield stood beside the machine, pointing at my property like she owned it. Her perfectly manicured finger directed the destruction of everything my family had built. The foreman handed her a clipboard. She signed it with a satisfied smile. Behind her, 23 homes in Vista Ridge Estates watched the show. Their sprinkler systems watered their perfect lawns. Their pools sparkled in the Texas sun, all of it fed by water that flowed beneath my boots. Margaret had no idea what she had just done. She thought she was finally putting the stubborn rancher in his place. What she did not know was simple. Every drop of water feeding her precious subdivision belonged to me. That was the day I decided to turn off the tap. My name is Jake Thompson, and I am the 3rd generation of my family to work this land. 240 acres of prime Texas hill country, passed down from my grandfather in 1962. The same man who taught me that a handshake means something, that your word is your bond, that good neighbors respect each other. For most of my life, that was true. The rolling hills around my ranch used to be empty, nothing but mesquite trees and wildflowers as far as you could see. Cattle grazed in peace. The only sounds were wind through the grass and the occasional hawk overhead. It was paradise. Then came Vista Ridge Estates. The development started small. A few houses here and there, built by city folks looking for their slice of country living. I did not mind. Actually welcomed the company. When their kids got curious about the horses, I would let them pet the gentle ones. When their fancy cars got stuck in the mud after a storm, I pulled them out with my truck. We coexisted just fine for 8 years. Everything changed when they formed the Homeowners Association. Margaret Thornfield moved in from Dallas with her investment banker husband. Big money, bigger attitude. Within 6 months, she was elected HOA president. Within a year, she was running the place like her personal kingdom. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Official letterhead, certified mail. The language was cold and bureaucratic. Dear Mr. Thompson, it has come to the attention of the Vista Ridge Estates Homeowners Association that your property presents several violations of community standards. Your livestock operations create unsightly conditions that negatively impact property values throughout our neighborhood. I read it twice before the words sank in. Community standards for my own land. I called Margaret directly, tried to explain that this was a working ranch, not a hobby farm, that my family had been here long before her subdivision existed, that I had every right to run cattle on my own property. Her response was sharp and dismissive. Mr. Thompson, times change. This is no longer the middle of nowhere. We have invested significant money in creating a quality community. Your operations are incompatible with our vision. Vision, as if my family's legacy was something that needed to be erased for her convenience. The letters kept coming. Every month brought new complaints. My barn was too close to the property line. My equipment was visible from the road. My cattle were too loud in the morning. Each demand more ridiculous than the last. I tried reasoning with her, tried explaining that I had been here first, that I had rights as a property owner, that we could find ways to coexist. She was not interested in coexistence. She wanted me gone. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning in March. I was checking fence lines in my back pasture when I saw them. Fresh tire tracks in the mud, surveying stakes driven into the ground, orange spray paint marking trees that had stood for decades. My blood ran cold. Someone had been on my land without permission. Someone had been planning something. I followed the trail of stakes and paint marks. They led in a straight line from the subdivision boundary to my main water well, the same well that had served my family for 60 years, the same well that fed my livestock and irrigated my fields. That night I could not sleep. I stood on my porch, looking out at the lights of Vista Ridge Estates, all those perfect houses with their perfect lawns, all those people who had moved here for the country life but wanted to change everything that made it country. I had no idea what Margaret was planning, but I knew it was going to be bad. The war was about to begin. The bulldozers arrived at dawn. I was feeding the horses when I heard the engines, deep, rumbling diesel that shook the ground. I dropped the hay bale and ran toward the sound. What I saw made my heart stop. 3 pieces of heavy equipment tearing through my pasture, a bulldozer, an excavator, and a trenching machine. They were digging a channel directly across my grazing land. Mud and grass flew everywhere. 60 years of careful land management destroyed in minutes. I ran toward the closest machine, waving my arms. "Stop, this is private property." The bulldozer operator saw me coming. He shut down his engine and climbed out of the cab, a big man with a hard hat and a dismissive expression. "You got a problem, buddy?" "Yeah, I got a problem. You are tearing up my land without permission." He pulled a folded paper from his shirt pocket. "We got proper authorization from the county. This is all legal." I snatched the paper from his hands. It was covered in official stamps and signatures, legal language that made no sense. But at the bottom, clear as day, was Margaret Thornfield's name as the authorized representative. "This is garbage. I never gave anyone permission to dig on my property." The foreman shrugged. "Take it up with the lady who hired us. We are just doing our job." The excavator kept digging. The trenching machine kept cutting. They were installing some kind of pipe system, large diameter, professional grade. This was not a small project. This was infrastructure. I called the sheriff's department from my truck, explained the situation to the dispatcher. 30 minutes later, Deputy Martinez arrived. He was a good man, someone I had known for years, but his hands were tied. "Jake, I understand your frustration, but they have paperwork saying this is a legal easement. I cannot stop them without a court order." "Easement? I never granted any easement." According to this, the county recognized their claim based on abandoned property rights. Says you have not used this section of land for agricultural purposes in over 5 years. My jaw dropped. "Deputy, I graze cattle on this land every season. I have for 30 years. "I believe you, Jake, but I am not a judge. You need to take this to court." That was when Margaret appeared. She climbed out of a white Mercedes SUV like she was arriving at a country club. Designer jeans, spotless boots, and a smug expression that made my hands clench into fists. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. I see you have met our construction crew." "Margaret, what the hell do you think you are doing?" "I am securing a reliable water source for our community. Your little well has been inadequate for our growing needs." "My well? You want to tap into my well?" She pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. "According to our research, this section of your property has been unused for years. Texas law allows us to claim prescriptive easements on abandoned land. We filed the proper paperwork with the county." I stared at her in disbelief. "You filed paperwork to steal my land?" "We filed paperwork to secure water rights that you have been neglecting. Our community needs a reliable source. Your well is the most logical option." The bulldozer started up again. The sound was deafening. Margaret had to raise her voice to be heard. The installation will be completed within a week. Once operational, our system will provide adequate water pressure for all 96 homes in Vista Ridge Estates. It is a win-win situation. Win-win, you are destroying my pasture. You will be compensated for any damage to your unused land. Our HOA voted to offer you $2,000 for your inconvenience. $2,000 for the destruction of my grandfather's pasture, for the theft of my water rights, for the violation of everything my family had worked to build. I watched the excavator lower a section of pipe into the trench. The pipe was at least 18 inches in diameter, industrial grade. This was not a temporary solution. This was permanent infrastructure built to serve the subdivision for decades. Margaret climbed back into her Mercedes. Before driving away, she rolled down her window. "Mr. Thompson, I hope you understand that fighting this will only cost you money you do not have. Sometimes it is better to accept progress." Progress, that was what she called stealing my water. As the sun set that evening, I walked the length of their construction. The pipe ran from the subdivision boundary directly to my main well. They had built a pump house over my water source. They had installed meters and controls. They had taken complete control of the aquifer that fed my land. They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. That night I could not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and stared at the legal documents Margaret had shoved in my face. The language was confusing, full of terms like prescriptive easement and adverse possession. But one thing was clear. They claimed I had abandoned my water rights. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse. The clerk in the records office was a woman named Betty who had worked there for 30 years. She knew every family in the county and every piece of property. "Jake Thompson, what brings you down here?" "Betty, I need to see the original deed to my land, the one from when my grandfather bought it." She disappeared into the back room. 20 minutes later, she returned with a thick folder wrapped in string. The papers inside were yellowed with age. Some were so old they were barely readable. But there it was, the original land patent from 1892, the deed that transferred the property from the state of Texas to my great-grandfather. I read every word twice. Then I saw something that made my heart race. The deed included mineral rights, water rights, surface rights, everything below the ground and everything above it. Not just the land itself, but everything that made the land valuable. I drove straight to the office of Tom Martinez, the attorney who had handled my grandfather's estate. Tom was in his 70s now, but his mind was sharp as ever. "Jake, what can I do for you?" I spread the documents across his desk. "Tom, I need to understand what these papers mean." He put on his reading glasses and studied the deed. After a few minutes, he looked up with surprise. "Jake, do you realize what you have here?" "I have the deed to my land." "You have complete ownership of one of the largest aquifers in central Texas. Water rights, mineral rights, everything. Your great-grandfather was a smart man. He made sure his family would control this land forever." My pulse quickened. "What does that mean exactly?" Tom leaned back in his chair. "It means every drop of water that comes out of the ground on your property belongs to you, not just the surface water, the underground water too. The aquifer that feeds your well extends for miles in every direction." "How far?" "Let me make some calls." An hour later, Tom had the answer. He spread a geological survey map across his desk. The aquifer was massive. It stretched from my property all the way under Vista Ridge Estates. The entire subdivision sat on top of water that belonged to me. Jake, according to this survey, your property controls the main flow of the aquifer. The water that feeds every well in the subdivision comes from underground streams that originate on your land. I stared at the map, so when they tapped into my well, they tapped into your water, water you own, water they have no legal right to use. Tom pulled out another document. This gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. The subdivision was built without securing proper water rights. They drilled wells assuming they could access groundwater, but they never filed for permits. They never bought water rights from you. Can they do that? Not legally. In Texas, water rights are tied to land ownership. They can drill wells on their property, but they cannot take water that originates on someone else's land. The pieces started falling into place. Margaret's aggressive behavior, her rush to install the pipe system, her claims about abandoned property rights. She knew the subdivision was built on shaky legal ground. She was trying to solve their water problem by stealing my water. Tom gathered the documents. Jake, I need to be clear about something. This is not just about your well. This is about the entire water supply for Vista Ridge Estates. According to this geological survey, if you control the aquifer flow, you control their water. All of it. All of it. 96 homes, their pools, their sprinkler systems, everything. They built a multi-million-dollar subdivision on top of your water without asking permission. I drove home in a daze. Margaret thought she was bullying a simple rancher who did not know his rights. What she did not know was that she had just stolen water from someone who legally owned every drop. The HOA had made their biggest mistake. They had picked a fight with the wrong person. Now it was time to show them who really controlled the water. Tom Martinez recommended a specialist. Sarah Chen was the best water rights attorney in Texas. She had fought cases against oil companies, developers, and the state itself. If anyone could help me, it was her. Her office was in Austin, an hour drive from the ranch. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Mr. Thompson, I have reviewed your case. What the HOA has done is not just illegal, it is theft on a massive scale. She spread aerial photos across her desk. Your property sits at the highest elevation in the area. The aquifer flows downhill from your land to the entire subdivision. You do not just own water rights, you own the source. How much water are we talking about? Based on the geological survey, approximately 40,000 gallons per day flow from your property into the subdivision's water system. At current rates, that is worth about $1,200 per month in water usage. $1,200 per month. They had been stealing over $14,000 worth of water per year. Sarah pulled out more documents. This gets worse for them. The HOA spent $2.3 million on their water infrastructure, pipes, pumps, treatment facilities, storage tanks. All of it depends on water they have no legal right to use. Can they claim some kind of emergency need? No, emergency provisions do not apply when you build a development without securing water rights first. They created their own emergency through poor planning. Sarah leaned forward. Mr. Thompson, you hold all the cards here. The entire subdivision depends on your water. Their HOA has invested millions in infrastructure that only works if you allow it, and you have zero legal obligation to provide them with anything. The next week, I received another letter from Margaret. This one was even more aggressive than the first. Mr. Thompson, Your continued resistance to reasonable community standards has forced us to pursue legal remedies. The HOA has filed complaints with the county regarding your noncompliance with agricultural zoning requirements. We have also reported your well for potential contamination issues that may affect community health. Contamination issues. She was trying to get the county to shut down my well, the same well that was feeding her precious subdivision. I called Sarah immediately. "Let them try," she said. "Any inspection will reveal that they are illegally tapping into your water source. We can file counterclaims for theft of water rights, trespass, and destruction of property." "What do you recommend?" "We send them a cease and desist order. Demand they stop using your water immediately. Give them 10 days to comply. And if they refuse, then we shut off their water and let them explain to 96 homeowners why their HOA president built their community on someone else's water without asking permission." The cease and desist letter was beautiful. 5 pages of legal language that boiled down to a simple message: "Stop stealing my water or face the consequences." I hand-delivered it to Margaret's front door. She answered wearing tennis clothes and a scowl. "Mr. Thompson, I hope you are not here to cause more trouble." I handed her the envelope. "This is from my attorney. I suggest you read it carefully." She tore it open right there on her porch. I watched her face change as she read. The smug confidence melted away. Her hands started shaking. "This is ridiculous. You cannot just cut off water to an entire community." "Actually, I can. It is my water. You never asked permission to use it." "We filed proper paperwork with the county." "You filed paperwork claiming abandoned land rights, but you never owned the water rights. You built your entire system on water that belongs to me." Margaret stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Mr. Thompson, if you think some small-town lawyer can intimidate the Vista Ridge HOA, you are mistaken. We have resources you cannot imagine." "Then you better use those resources to find a new water source, because in 10 days I am shutting off the tap." She slammed the door so hard it rattled the windows. I walked back to my truck with a smile on my face. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control. Margaret thought she could bully me into submission. She thought her money and her lawyers could steamroll a simple rancher. She was about to learn that this rancher owned the one thing her money could not buy: the water that kept her perfect world running. 10 days later, I was ready. Sarah had helped me install flow control valves at the main aquifer access point. Professional-grade equipment that would allow me to regulate exactly how much water flowed from my property to the subdivision. The system included digital meters that tracked every gallon. I stood at the control panel at 6 in the morning. The sun was just coming up over the hills. Vista Ridge Estates was waking up. Sprinkler systems were starting their morning cycles. Coffee makers were brewing. Showers were running. I turned the main valve to the off position. The effect was not immediate. The subdivision had storage tanks and residual pressure in the pipes, but within an hour, the first calls started coming in. My phone rang at 7:15. "Jake, this is Margaret. Turn the water back on immediately." "Good morning, Margaret. I assume you read my attorney's letter. Your 10-day deadline is harassment. We are not going to be bullied by some rancher with a grudge." "This is not about a grudge. This is about property rights. You are using my water without permission." "We filed proper easement claims." "You filed fraudulent claims on land that was never abandoned. My cattle graze that pasture every season. You knew that when you filed." The line went quiet for a moment. Jake, be reasonable. You cannot just cut off water to 96 families. I can and I did. Find your own water source. I hung up. By 9 o'clock, the panic was spreading. Residents were posting on social media about low water pressure. The HOA office was flooded with calls. Emergency plumbers were being called to check for system failures. Margaret called an emergency HOA meeting for that evening. The community center was packed. I could see the crowd from my porch. Cars lined the streets. People were angry and confused. I decided to attend. Sarah met me at the community center. She carried a briefcase full of documents: historical land records, geological surveys, water rights documentation, and photographs of the illegal construction on my property. The meeting was chaos. Residents demanded answers. Margaret stood at the front of the room, trying to maintain control. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing a temporary water shortage due to equipment failure in our main system. A man in the back row stood up. Margaret, my neighbor says Jake Thompson shut off our water. Is that true? Margaret's face flushed red. Mr. Thompson has made unreasonable demands regarding our water infrastructure. We are working to resolve the situation. What kind of demands? That was my cue. I stood up from the back of the room. The demand is simple: stop stealing my water. The room erupted. Dozens of conversations started at once. Margaret tried to regain control. Mr. Thompson, you are not a member of this HOA. You have no right to speak at our meeting. You are right. I am not a member, but I am the owner of the water you have been stealing for 2 years. Sarah stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sarah Chen. I represent Mr. Thompson in this matter. The Vista Ridge HOA has built their entire water system on water they have no legal right to use. She opened her briefcase and pulled out the historical documents. Mr. Thompson's family has owned complete water rights to this aquifer since 1892. The HOA never secured permission to tap into this water source. They built $2.3 million worth of infrastructure on stolen water. A woman near the front stood up. Are you saying our HOA built our water system illegally? That is exactly what I am saying. Every drop of water that flows into Vista Ridge Estates originates on Mr. Thompson's property. Water he owns. Water you have been using without his permission. The room fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. Margaret looked like she was about to be sick. An older man raised his hand. What does this mean for our property values? Sarah answered. It means your HOA president committed your community to a multi-million-dollar investment in infrastructure that depends entirely on the goodwill of someone she has been harassing for 2 years. Margaret tried to interrupt. This is all theoretical. Mr. Thompson cannot just cut off water to an entire community. Actually, he can, Sarah replied. And he has. Your water pressure dropped to 0 at 6 o'clock this morning. The crowd turned to stare at Margaret. The anger in the room was palpable. People were realizing that their HOA president had lied to them. Their water system was built on shaky legal ground. Their property values were at risk. A woman in the front row stood up. Margaret, did you know about this when you approved the water project? Margaret's silence was answer enough. I looked around the room at 96 families who had been betrayed by their own HOA president. They had trusted her to make decisions in their best interest. Instead, she had gambled their future on stolen water. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Small groups formed around the room. Angry voices demanded answers. Margaret tried to explain, but no one was listening anymore. I walked out of the community center with Sarah beside me. The parking lot was full of residents arguing about what to do next. "How long can you keep their water shut off?" Sarah asked. "As long as it takes." The next morning, Margaret showed up at my front door with 3 men in expensive suits. Lawyers, by the look of them. Big city types with briefcases and attitudes. I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise. I did not get up when they approached. "Mr. Thompson," Margaret said, "these gentlemen represent the Vista Ridge HOA legal team. We are here to discuss a resolution to this water situation." The lead lawyer stepped forward. He was tall, gray-haired, and spoke with the confidence of someone who had never lost a case. "Mr. Thompson, I am David Harrison from Harrison, Burke and Associates. We represent the Vista Ridge Homeowners Association. Our client is prepared to offer you a generous settlement to resolve this dispute." "I am listening." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. "We are prepared to offer you $50,000 for a permanent easement to access the water source on your property. This would resolve all claims and allow both parties to move forward." $50,000 for water rights worth millions. That is your generous offer. "Mr. Thompson, be reasonable. Fighting this in court will cost you more than you can afford. We have resources and legal expertise that will overwhelm any small-town attorney." I took a sip of my coffee. "You mean like the legal expertise that told you to build a water system on someone else's property without asking permission?" The lawyers exchanged glances. Margaret stepped forward. "Jake, this has gone far enough. You are holding an entire community hostage over a property dispute. People have children, elderly residents. You cannot just cut off their water." "I am not holding anyone hostage. I am protecting my property rights. You built your community on my water without my consent." David Harrison tried again. "Mr. Thompson, our research shows that your water usage has been minimal for years. You are not harmed by sharing this resource with the community." "Your research is wrong, and even if it were right, it does not matter. It is my water. You do not get to decide how I use it." Margaret's patience finally snapped. "Fine. You want to play hardball. We will file injunctions to force you to restore water service. We will sue you for damages. We will make sure every newspaper in Texas knows how you held families hostage over money." "Go ahead. File your injunctions. Sue me. Call the newspapers. But first, explain to those families how their HOA president spent $2.3 million on infrastructure that depends on water she never had the right to use." The lawyers whispered among themselves. David Harrison tried one more time. "Mr. Thompson, what will it take to resolve this situation?" Margaret's resignation from the HOA board, a formal apology to the community, and fair compensation for 2 years of stolen water. Margaret laughed. "You are delusional if you think I am going to resign because of your threats. Then enjoy explaining to your neighbors why they have no water." After they left, I called Sarah. They offered $50,000. For water rights worth millions. That is insulting. They also threatened to sue me for damages. Let them try. Every lawsuit they file will require discovery. Every document they produce will show they knew they were building on someone else's water. That afternoon, I noticed cars pulling into Margaret's driveway. Her closest allies on the HOA board were gathering for crisis talks, but other residents were also gathering. Small groups meeting in driveways and front yards. People were asking questions. The answers they found were not good for Margaret. I received a call from a resident named Tom Wilson. He was a retired engineer who had moved to Vista Ridge for the quiet life. "Mr. Thompson, I hope you do not mind me calling. I got your number from the phone book." "Not at all, Tom. What can I do for you?" "I have been digging into our HOA finances, looking at the contracts for our water system. The numbers do not add up." "What do you mean?" "We paid $2.3 million for infrastructure that should have cost $1.5 million. The contracts were awarded to companies owned by Margaret's friends. No competitive bidding. No oversight." My blood ran cold. "Are you saying she stole money from the HOA?" "I am saying there are a lot of questions that need answers. Questions about why we overpaid for everything. Questions about why she rushed the project through without proper legal review. Questions about where the extra money went." That evening, I watched from my porch as more residents gathered outside the community center. Tom Wilson had called his own meeting. He was sharing his financial research with anyone who would listen. The crowd was getting bigger and angrier. Margaret's water theft was bad enough, but if she had also been stealing money from the HOA budget, her troubles were just beginning. My phone rang. It was Margaret. "Jake, I want to make a deal." Her voice was different now, less confident, almost desperate. "I am listening. Drop your water claims, and I will make sure the HOA stops bothering you about your ranch operations." "That is not how this works, Margaret. You do not get to negotiate with stolen water." "What do you want?" "I want you to face the consequences of your actions." The line went dead. Through my window, I could see the lights of Vista Ridge Estates. Some houses were dark, others glowed with emergency candles. The perfect community was falling apart. And it was all because their HOA president thought she could steal water from a rancher who did not know his rights. She was wrong about the rancher, and she was about to be wrong about everything else. The end came faster than I expected. Tom Wilson's financial investigation revealed that Margaret had been stealing from the HOA for 3 years. Inflated contracts, kickbacks from vendors, and outright theft from community funds. The water project was just the latest and largest theft. The HOA board called an emergency meeting to remove Margaret from office. She did not attend. By the time residents arrived at the community center, she was already gone. Her house was empty. Her Mercedes was missing from the driveway. Margaret Thornfield had fled in the middle of the night. The new HOA president was Tom Wilson. His first official act was to call me. "Mr. Thompson, I want to apologize on behalf of the entire community. What Margaret did was wrong. We had no idea about the water rights situation." "I appreciate that, Tom. We would like to negotiate a fair agreement for water access, something that respects your property rights and meets our community needs." "I am willing to listen." The negotiation took 2 weeks. Sarah represented my interests. The HOA hired a new attorney who actually understood water rights law. The agreement we reached was simple and fair. I would provide water access to Vista Ridge Estates through a permanent easement. In exchange, the HOA would pay me $1,200 per month for water usage. They would also pay $50,000 in compensation for the 2 years they had used my water without permission. The monthly payments would ensure I could maintain my ranch operations and make improvements to my property. The compensation would fund new equipment and fence repairs. Most importantly, the agreement included strict limits on water usage and environmental protections for the aquifer. The subdivision could not expand beyond its current size without renegotiating the contract. Tom Wilson signed the agreement at my kitchen table, the same table where I had first read Margaret's threatening letters. Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that this community respects what you do here. Your ranch is part of what makes this area special. I appreciate that, Tom. I have always been willing to be a good neighbor to people who treat me with respect. The story made the local newspaper. Rancher recovers stolen water rights from HOA. The article explained how a developer had built a subdivision without securing proper water access, and how the community had been deceived by their own leadership. Margaret was never prosecuted. She had disappeared with over $200,000 in stolen HOA funds. The FBI opened an investigation, but she was never found. The new HOA board implemented reforms to prevent future corruption. All contracts now required competitive bidding. All major expenditures required community approval. All board members were subject to annual financial audits. My relationship with the residents of Vista Ridge Estates improved dramatically. The new board invited me to community events. Residents stopped to chat when they saw me working in the fields. Their children learned about ranch life and the importance of water conservation. I used the monthly water payments to modernize my operation. New fences, improved irrigation, and better facilities for the cattle. The ranch was more profitable than it had been in years. Most importantly, I had preserved my family's legacy. The land my great-grandfather had secured in 1892 would continue to support ranching operations for future generations. The entire experience taught me valuable lessons about standing up to bullies and knowing your rights. Margaret thought she could intimidate me because I was just a rancher. She assumed I would not fight back because I did not have her resources or connections. She was wrong on all counts. Sometimes the person who looks powerless holds all the cards. Sometimes the bully who seems invincible is actually standing on shaky ground. Sometimes the best revenge is simply enforcing your legal rights and letting the truth speak for itself. I still live on the same ranch where I was born, the same land where my grandfather taught me that your word is your bond. The same hills where 3 generations of my family have worked cattle. The water still flows from my aquifer to Vista Ridge Estates, but now it flows under a fair contract that respects everyone's rights. And every month, when I deposit that $1,200 check, I remember the lesson Margaret Thornfield learned too late. Do not steal water from someone who owns the well.